You think gas stations are safe? A place to stop, grab a coffee, fill up your tank, or take a break in the middle of the night? Think again. In today's video, you'll hear 3 true stories, real encounters in those familiar places. Gas stations, lit by flickering fluorescent lights, smelling of gasoline, and watched by eyes that never blink. A strange man appears on a stormy night, repeating only one sentence. I just did something horrible. A stranger quietly waits in your back seat at 4 a.m. and whispers, I could have slit your throat. And a deserted station with a slightly ajar restroom door, where a child nearly became the first to see something no one should ever see. In each story, the danger doesn't come from ghosts or the supernatural. It comes from the living, people with empty eyes, silent steps, and one mission: to catch you off guard. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and ask yourself, if you stopped at a gas station at 2 a.m., is someone already sitting in your back seat? When Rob took the night shift at a remote gas station, he expected nothing more than a few extra bucks to cover his bills. The job was straightforward: restock shelves, mop the floors, monitor the coffee machine, and watch the occasional car pull in and out under the darkness. That was until he appeared. The first encounter was on a Tuesday night around 2 a.m. A tall man, nearly 6 feet tall, with long matted hair resembling ropes, staggered into the store. He grabbed the cheapest beer can, muttered something unintelligible, and left without fueling his car. From then on, he became a regular. Almost every night at the same time, he would return, same beer, same disheveled appearance, and a gaze that seemed to pierce through Rob. Rob began referring to him by the name he eventually provided: Bob. Initially, Bob didn't seem dangerous. He would often mispronounce Rob's name as Rod and make cryptic comments like, I like that name, followed by unsettling chuckles as if conversing with someone invisible. One night, Rob mustered the courage to ask, What's your name? Bob looked up, his bloodshot eyes taking a moment to focus. Bob, he replied, his voice thick and slurred. Rob doubted the authenticity of the name but chose not to press further. There was something about Bob that sent chills down his spine, a coldness that wasn't from the air conditioning but from deep within. Some nights, Bob would simply stand motionless, leaning against a shelf, staring intently at a spot on the wall as if waiting for it to respond. During those moments, the atmosphere in the gas station would become oppressively heavy, as if the entire building was holding its breath. Rob couldn't decide what was more unsettling: Bob's eerie presence or the thought of him not showing up one night. Bob vanished for nearly 2 weeks. At first, Rob didn't think much of it, but by the 8th night, he began to notice the eerie silence. The beer cans Bob usually bought remained untouched on the shelf. The security camera no longer captured the disheveled man entering at 2 a.m., and a part of Rob, though he wouldn't admit it, felt an unsettling absence until that stormy night. The wind howled against the metal roof, lightning slashed the sky like cold claws, and rain poured down in punishing sheets. The gas station flickered under the weak power grid, casting pale, unsteady light. Rob was mopping the floor when he heard the familiar bing, the automatic door chime signaling someone's entrance. His gut told him who it was: Bob. But this wasn't the usual Bob. He stood at the entrance, drenched from head to toe, hair matted and tangled, expressionless. His black shirt clung to his skin, making him look more like a corpse risen from the grave than a man caught in the rain. He didn't look at Rob or anything in particular, just stood there, soaked, eyes wide and vacant, as if lost in another world. Rob hesitated, then spoke. Bob? "Are you okay?" No response, no movement. After a moment, Bob spoke, his voice hoarse, as if from a distant place. "I just did something really bad." Without waiting for a reply, Bob walked past Rob, heading straight for the narrow hallway leading to the two restrooms at the back. One of the doors opened, then closed. Silence. Rob stood frozen. Bob's words echoed in his mind. "I just did something really bad." That didn't sound like drunken rambling. It carried weight, consequence. Minutes passed, then tens of minutes. No flushing, no door opening, no retching, only the sound of rain and the flickering lights above. Rob reached for the phone to call the police, but at that moment, the lights went out. The rain sound intensified. Darkness enveloped the station. Complete darkness. No lights, no cameras. And somewhere in the back hallway, Bob, or whatever remained of him, Rob grabbed the flashlight from under the counter. His hands trembled. Deep down, he knew. Bob was no longer just a drunk. Rob stood in the suffocating darkness of the gas station, gripping his old flashlight tightly, its beam barely illuminating a narrow path ahead. Outside, the wind howled and rain pelted the tin roof like 100 fists pounding on the door. But inside, the most chilling sound was the absolute silence emanating from the back hallway, where Bob had vanished. Rob took cautious steps toward the rear of the store, where two restroom doors and the entrance to the storage room awaited. His flashlight's beam swept over the shelves, casting dancing shadows that made everything seem alive. But he knew, only one thing was truly moving in this darkness, and it was waiting. Upon reaching the narrow hallway, Rob hesitated. Both restroom doors were ajar, just enough to reveal the pitch-black interiors. "Bob?" he called softly, his voice hoarse with tension. No response. He gently pushed open the left restroom door, empty. Then the right, also empty. Bob was nowhere to be found. Turning to head back to the counter, Rob was halted by a dripping sound behind him. He spun around, flashlight darting toward the slightly open storage room door, as if someone had entered and neglected to close it. Following the dripping came a soft shuffling, wet, like soaked shoes scraping against concrete. Rob's heart clenched. He approached the storage room door, his hand trembling with each step. "Bob, I'm not joking. If you're in there." The shuffling ceased. Rob pushed the door open forcefully. The flashlight's beam swept the room, illuminating every shadowy corner. Shelves, cardboard boxes, refrigeration units, all came into view, and in the far left corner stood Bob. He stood motionless, face pale, eyes wide open, pupils dilated into abyssal voids. His soaked shirt clung to his body. Beside him was a puddle of water, or perhaps something darker. As the flashlight's beam touched his face, Bob let out a guttural roar. "I'm going to kill you, Rob!" He lunged forward, arms flailing, fingernails clawing like animal talons. Rob stumbled backward, falling onto the floor. Bob pounced, breathing heavily, foam forming at his mouth. Rob struggled in panic, the flashlight slipping from his grasp, its light flickering across the walls. In that moment, Rob realized Bob wasn't merely drunk. He seemed possessed, a raw, wild, hateful creature. And he knew Rob's name. Summoning all his strength, Rob shoved hard, causing Bob to recoil briefly. Just enough time for Rob to escape, sprinting down the hallway, bursting into the rain like someone who had just escaped a living nightmare. Behind him, no one pursued. Only the sound of rain and the echoing growls from the darkness. Rob sat trembling inside his car, the rain pounding on the roof as if the sky were unleashing all its sins upon the earth. The headlights cut through the thick curtain of water, their beams dancing on the windshield smeared with grime and fingerprints. His voice cracked with emotion as he called 911, barely holding back tears. Within minutes, 2 police cruisers arrived. Rob led the officers inside. The storage room door remained ajar, a trail of wet footprints stretching from the hallway to the back. The officers shone their flashlights into the corner where Bob had last vanished into the shadows. He was still there, huddled like a wounded animal, his eyes wild, muttering incoherent words. Blood stained his shirt. When an officer asked, "What did you do?" Bob replied with a single sentence, "I didn't want to, but I did." After taking Rob's statement and escorting Bob away, it seemed the ordeal was over. But a month later, Rob received a call from the police department. They confirmed Bob's real identity, Martin O'Donnell. Just hours before the gas station incident, he had killed his ex-wife during a violent psychotic episode at his home. And then, he went to the only place where someone had ever listened to him. Rob. The story made the local news. People dubbed Rob the survivor in the dark. But he didn't feel like one. Soon after, he quit his job, left town, and didn't leave a forwarding address. Occasionally, on stormy nights, he still dreams of Bob, standing at the gas station door, drenched, murmuring, "I did something horrible." And in those dreams, Rob never escapes in time, because every time, Bob still remembers his name. That night, Daniel just wanted to get home. It was nearly 4 a.m. He had just dropped off a friend after a meaningless gathering at the park, the kind of hangout young men in their 20s often label as fun. The city was silent, streetlights flickering as if struggling to stay awake. The familiar gas station stood at the corner, a place Daniel often stopped at during late nights, partly because it was close to home, partly because it was usually deserted. Usually. But not tonight. As he stepped out of his car, a short man wearing a gray hoodie walked by. The man paused mid-step, turned his head, and stared directly at Daniel. His gaze was emotionless, not angry, not hostile, just empty. Daniel frowned. "Is there a problem?" The man didn't respond. He stood there for a moment longer, then continued walking, disappearing around the corner. Daniel shivered. "Probably just a junkie," he muttered, then entered the store. Everything seemed normal. He paid for the gas, bought a lottery ticket, and returned to his car. The parking lot was still empty, eerily quiet. He got in, locked the doors, and inserted the key. But as the rearview mirror illuminated with the dashboard lights, Daniel froze. Eyes were staring at him from the back seat. Someone was sitting there, shrouded in darkness, silent, unmoving, not startled, not aggressive, just staring directly into his eyes through the mirror, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. When Daniel spun around, the man tilted his head, offered a faint smile, and whispered, "I could have slit your throat already." The wind outside continued to rustle, but inside the car, time stood still. Daniel couldn't recall how long he had screamed. All he knew was that his throat burned, his lungs ached, and everything that followed unfolded in a blur of panic, like a film on fast forward. He slammed the brakes, the car screeching to a halt in the desolate street, tires wailing into the silent night. His hands fumbled for the door handle, his voice hoarse as he shouted, "Get out, now!" The stranger in the back seat remained motionless for a heartbeat, then calmly opened the door. He stepped out unhurriedly, showing no fear, no confusion, only a composed demeanor, as if this were his car and Daniel the intruder. "I could have slit your throat back at the gas station," he murmured, his voice low and steady, like reciting a proverb. Daniel staggered backward, nearly tripping. His hands trembled uncontrollably, his heart pounding so fiercely it felt like his chest might burst. A nearby house door creaked open. Porch lights flickered on from both sides. Curious neighbors stepped out, still in their sleepwear. The stranger glanced around, smirked slightly. "Too many people," he muttered, then turned and jogged away. His gait uneven, as if he'd done this countless times and saw no need to rush. Daniel didn't pursue him. A middle-aged man approached, phone in hand, asking, "Are you okay?" "There was someone in my car at the gas station," Daniel rasped. He was sitting behind me. I had no idea." A woman interjected, "Did you lock your doors?" Daniel realized he hadn't. He never locked his car when stopping at the gas station late at night. This town was always peaceful. That gas station was considered safe until tonight. The police arrived later, took statements, asked for descriptions, but Daniel knew they wouldn't find him. That man needed no weapon. He only needed an opportunity, an unlocked door, a moment of vulnerability, and the confidence of someone who believed the night was still safe. That night, Daniel didn't go home immediately. He sat in his car for hours, clutching the keys, eyes fixed on the rearview mirror, fearing it might reflect that face again. From that day forward, he never forgot to check the back seat. Because sometimes, the most terrifying thing isn't the darkness outside the car. It's something, or someone that was already inside. After that night, Daniel changed. He locked his car doors even when filling up with gas in broad daylight, installed the best dash cam on the market, added convex mirrors to cover every possible angle. But nothing could erase the look in that man's eyes. Those quiet, cloudy eyes and the chilling whisper, "I could have slit your throat." A week later, Daniel still flinched when checking his rearview mirror, only to see himself. And then, on a Friday night, as he parked in front of his house after work, something felt off. The porch light was on. The engine purred smoothly. But inside him, that primal warning blared like a silent alarm. He didn't get out right away. He sat still, watched. Then he saw it. On the front windshield, lower right corner. A smear. A fingerprint. A faint, dragged mark. As if someone had rested a hand there, then slid it down. Daniel stepped out, clutching his keys like a weapon. He circled the car. No one. No sound. The neighbors' houses were dark, quiet. But what froze his blood? Was the note tucked under the wiper blade? Just one line, scribbled in black ink. Backseat still comfy as ever. Daniel nearly vomited. He bolted inside, locked every door, and turned on every light. His heart pounded like war drums in his chest. His hands shook so badly he couldn't dial 911. By the time the police arrived, the note was gone. No trace. No security camera caught anything. Everything was just like before, down to the last detail. The officer asked if he had any enemies. Anyone following him recently? Daniel shook his head. "You sure no one knows your home address?" Daniel was about to say no. Then he remembered the gas station. The man had asked, "You live around here?" And in a moment of carelessness, Daniel had answered. Not specifically, but enough for someone determined to find him. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He left the living room light on, sitting facing the window, eyes fixed on the darkness outside, where at any moment that stare could return. No break-in needed. Just a quiet figure in the back seat, waiting. After the second incident, Daniel stopped driving at night. He sold his old car, bought a new SUV with tinted windows, auto lock, and motion sensors. Every time he got into the vehicle, he opened all the doors, checked every seat, including the trunk. People around him called it paranoid, but Daniel knew the truth. He was still out there, not some random drifter, not a junkie looking for shelter, but a hunter, one who chooses targets, watches, remembers, and most terrifying of all, enjoys the game of return. Daniel moved house, changed his phone number, but every night he dreamt he was back in the car, staring into the rearview mirror. And instead of seeing his face, he saw those empty eyes and that cold, hollow smile. Once, in a dream, the man didn't issue a threat. He just asked, "Why didn't you unlock the door tonight?" Daniel woke up with his hand clutching the car key, even though he was in bed. He stopped reporting to the police, stopped telling friends about it. Because after everything, Daniel understood the most terrifying truth. This was no longer an accident, not just bad luck. This was personal. And what kept him awake at night wasn't the fact that the man had once sat in his back seat, but that he never needed to again. All he had to do was let Daniel know he could, anytime, anywhere. And the rearview mirror, it would always be the first place to remind him of that. That year, a boy named Andy was only 8 years old, living with his parents in the suburbs of Atlanta. Every early morning, he rode to school with his father, who was both a teacher at the school and Andy's instructor. They woke before the sky turned light, while the streets were still asleep, and the early air was as cold and groggy as river water just receded. On the way to school, the two would always stop at a small gas station off the highway. It was old and worn but familiar, with a glass-walled control booth, 2 silver fuel pumps, and a tiny restroom tucked behind a wooden fence. Andy remembered every crack in the tile floor, every squeak of the bathroom latch. Everything was calm, predictable, like the ticking of his father's wristwatch. That morning, as their car turned into the station, dawn hadn't yet broken, but something felt wrong. There was no one in the booth, no silhouettes, no lights inside. Everything was completely still, a silence not born of peace, but of absence. Andy's father honked the horn. Once. No one came out. 3 more times. Still, no response. "Maybe he's in the bathroom," his father said, trying to sound casual. But Andy felt his heartbeat quicken. The silence was too perfect, too clean, as if someone had vacuumed every sound out of the air. Andy reached out, hand on the door, about to go use the restroom like he always did, but his father stopped him. "We'll go to another station." Andy looked through the window, toward the restroom. The door was slightly ajar, and if he had stepped out of the car that morning, pushed that door open, he might have seen something that would have kept his childhood from ever sleeping peacefully again. The car quietly pulled away from the gas station, leaving behind a silence so eerie it felt like something had been left unfinished. Andy turned his head, looking out the window, watching the small station shrink in the distance before disappearing behind a bend. He didn't know why it felt so strange. There was nothing specific, just wrong. Everything felt wrong in a way that children often sense more sharply than adults. Not the horn, not the lighting, but the feeling that he had nearly stepped into a place he didn't belong. His father drove without speaking, but his hands gripped the steering wheel tightly than usual. "You'll use the restroom at the next stop," he said. His voice tried to sound normal, but there was something tight in it. That morning, Andy didn't think much of it. He went to class, sat by the window, occasionally glancing outside, as if expecting a familiar car to pull into the school's front lot. It wasn't until a few days later, when his father was reading the morning paper in the living room, that he gasped, "Oh God!" and the paper slipped from his hands. Andy rushed over and saw the small headline buried in the inner pages. Gas station attendant found dead in restroom, suspected homicide. His father read the article aloud, his hands trembling slightly. The victim was a middle-aged man, an employee at the same gas station they had stopped at. The murder had occurred in the early hours that same morning. The body was discovered hours later, hidden in the restroom, apparently stabbed multiple times. All the cash from the station was gone. Andy stood frozen. He thought of the dim lights, the empty glass booth, and the door slightly ajar behind the station. If his father had let him get out, if he had gone to the restroom as usual, he might have been the one to open that door. And what would have greeted him behind it? It wasn't a small, quiet room, but the lifeless stare of a murdered man, the smell of blood. A piece of his childhood was torn apart forever. They never went back to that gas station again. But sometimes, when Andy drives through the old suburbs, passing by lonely gas stations in the early hours of morning, he still gets a chill down his spine, not because of the stations themselves, but because of that door, the one left ajar, where a terrible secret once waited to be discovered. And for Andy, that morning, he was lucky. It hadn't been opened yet. Years passed. Andy grew up, left the old town, went to college, and then settled elsewhere. But whenever someone casually mentioned a gas station in conversation, his mind would drift back to that morning, in the pale mist, when his father's car stopped in front of an empty station, and he had almost stepped out. He had never told the full story to anyone, not even his wife. Until one day, while cleaning out his late father's storage room, Andy found an old box labeled personal records. Inside, along with documents, was a neatly folded newspaper, the very one from that year, with the article about the gas station murder. There was a detail in the article Andy had never noticed as a child. The body was discovered in the restroom by a truck driver who described the door as slightly ajar, as if the killer wanted someone to see, but not too soon. Andy read that line at least 10 times. Wanted someone to see. His chest tightened. Faint memories surged back clearer than ever. The cold wind seeping into the car, his hand on the door latch, his father's eyes in the rearview mirror whispering, "No, we'll wait for the next one." And Andy understood. His father had sensed something, a strange instinct, inexplicable. Maybe it was the perfect stillness, or something reflected in the mirror. Whatever it was, he had stopped Andy from opening that door, a small act, but it had saved Andy from a sight no child should ever see. But because he didn't see it, it followed him. In Andy's mind, what lay behind that door wasn't just a body. It was a wordless message from a killer, a crime left not to be hidden, but to be witnessed. And Andy had nearly been that witness. Now, whenever he stops at a lonely gas station in the early morning, Andy doesn't check the fuel price, doesn't glance at the clock. He looks toward the restroom. And if that door is even slightly ajar, his heart leaps to his throat. Because he knows, some killers don't hide what they've done. They display it, just waiting for some small hand to turn the handle. Andy is now in his 40s. He has an 8-year-old son, the same age he was back then. And just like his father once did, he takes his son to school every early morning before dawn has touched the rooftop still veiled in mist. But there is one thing Andy never does. He never stops at a gas station before the sky is fully lit. One winter morning, with the fuel tank nearly empty and the warning light glowing red, his son softly spoke from the back seat. "Dad, I need to use the bathroom." Andy tightened his grip on the wheel. A gas station appeared ahead, porch lights still on. But the glass of the control room was fogged over, and the restroom in the back was pitch dark, with its door silently ajar, just like that day long ago. He drove past it without a word, didn't stop. "Dad?" his son asked. "Next station," Andy replied, his voice firm, but his heart pounded like he was running from something that had never stopped following him. That night, after putting his son to bed, Andy opened his laptop and searched for the old article again. The article now had dozens of new comments, even though the case had long faded from public memory. One comment, written anonymously with no profile picture, read, "I saw that door open once, but I didn't go in. Not like the other boy did." Andy shut the laptop immediately. Sweat beaded at the back of his neck. He looked out the window. The sky was ink black, but somewhere deep inside, he heard the echo of a lone car horn and saw again the image of that restroom door quietly ajar. Nobody now, no blood, only fear. And the most haunting part is that it's still there, waiting for someone to open it. 3 stories, 3 gas stations, and 3 people who rarely made it back to their normal lives. A drunken man with hollow eyes, hiding a terrible secret behind the night rain. A figure silently sitting behind you, waiting for you to forget to lock your car. And a restroom door, slightly ajar, waiting for a child to step inside and see something no one should ever see. You might think these things only happen in movies, but the truth is, they happen. Every time someone thinks, it's probably nothing. Remember, nightmares don't just live in sleep. They can start from the smallest things. A strange sentence, a glance in the rearview mirror, or a door left barely open. Have you ever experienced something strange at a gas station? Had a moment when your heart nearly stopped because you came too close to danger? Share that story in the comments below. We read to everyone. And who knows, maybe you will be featured in the next video. Hit like if you'll be checking your backseat a little more carefully from now on. Hit subscribe if you don't want to miss the stories that'll change the way you look at gas stations forever. And turn on the notification bell, because the next episode might be waiting for you at the next intersection.